Hi, and welcome to my sci-fi, fantasy, and horror short fiction roundup for August 2020. And this month I've got quite a lot of stories, so I'm going to dive right in. First up is one of the most strikingly beautiful and powerful fantasy stories I've read so far this year. It's The Bone Stag Walks by K.T. Breisky in Lightspeed. And I'll start with a quote from the story. The bone stag walks at midwinter, sharp-antlered, hard-hoofed. Deep white snow spreads under deep black sky. Cold air slices lungs. Rivers stand as stone. Over cresting drifts comes the bone stag, leaving no mark of his passing. Down in the village they draw their curtains fast against him. They bolt tight their doors, garlic at the lintels and holly upon the sills. End quote. This is such a visceral and dark twist on several old fairy tales, and I love every gorgeous, unsettling, riveting bit of it. There's this melody, this rhythm to the prose in every sentence and paragraph, and the effect is mesmerizing. There are stories braided into other stories here, and as the truth at the heart of the tale is revealed, Breisky does not flinch from the darkness that lurks within all true fairy tales. And I'm going to apologize a little bit here if there are other sounds. It's probably my family in the background, but for now, I'm hoping it's okay. My next story is The Cat Lady and the Petitioner by Jennifer Hudak in Translunar Traveler's Lounge. And this is an awesome story to lift your spirits if you're having a bad day. There are cats, so many awesome cats. There's a cat lady who is anything but crazy, and there is the petitioner who knocks on the cat lady's door 3 times, so she can't be ignored. And then there is the house itself, the house that belongs to the cat lady, and there are the thin places where the universes connect, and, well, you should most definitely read the story. It's life-affirming and funny and contains a most excellent cat-assisted adventure. My next story is Tara's Mother's Skin by Susan Palumbo in Pseudopod. And I start with a quote from the story. You see this skin? She tugged at her creviced face. It slides away easier than a fresh bride's satin nightgown. I fold it in my mortar and blaze like fire in the night. Then I squeeze through the slits in your windowsill, Farah, and suck you dry. She stretched her hands the width of her doorway, clapped them closed, fixing her eyes on me again, needle sharp. I can't do the wonderful narration at Pseudopod justice. Please go listen to it. It's a fantastic story, fantastic narration by Ariel John. This is a story where Palumbo skillfully weaves together horror and childhood memories and reality, and she twists that weave until the pattern you thought you saw turns out to be something else. I really love how the horror hides in plain sight here. There's a simmering menace to the story from the start that really drew me in, and by the end, Palumbo had me fully and completely on the hook. To quote Palumbo's own story notes at Pseudopod, being from Trinidad, Caribbean folklore was a large part of my childhood. I grew up with stories about Jumbies and La Diablesse. The figure that loomed largest for me, however, was the Succulent. The idea of an old woman who could shed her skin and suck one's blood kept me terrified and awake at night for at least a couple of years. Please go listen to this story. Next up is Worm Song by David Neyman in Fireside. This is a short story that has the rhythm and feel of poetry, but it's fiction, and It's both wrenching and sublime. The repetition, the sing-song feel of the telling, and the deep sorrow and loss contained in every sentence is gloriously beautiful and utterly devastating. As the trees withdraw from the world, as they leave us behind, the already changing world is further changed, and something priceless is lost. I love the imagery of the tree spirits communing with each other here, and I love the audacious strangeness of the whole piece. Next up is August by Katie Piper in Flash Fiction Online. I'll start with a quote from the story. Elise goes into the woods behind her house and falls over her dead grandmother. Well, not quite. Elise sneaks into the woods behind her house and trips into the loamy concave of a grave the forest has sucked back beneath her skin. The crude headstone tells Elise that Mary Ann is buried here. No, the stone and its name are half swallowed by moss, and Mary Alice is napping in the black dirt beneath Elise's knees. Elise goes home and says, "I found Grandma in the woods." This is such a dark and deep flash story about childhood and magic, and about a child who finds a way to get what she wants and do what she wants in spite of her mother's efforts. I especially love how the story weaves fantasy and a shiver of horror into the everyday world of Walgreens, AA batteries, and muddy socks. My next story is A Voyage to Queen's Throat by Anya Johanna De Niro in Strange Horizons. This is a brilliant and epic science fantasy short story about an old warrior who must revisit her own past in order to help save the present and the future. At the heart of this epic tale is the tense and also profound relationship between an old warrior and her young protege. Everything about the story, the scope, the exquisitely wrought prose, the blend of fantasy and sword battles and science fiction is perfectly done. Please, can I have some more? It reminds me of De Niro's wonderful novella, City of a Thousand Feelings, which is out now from Aqueduct Press. My next story is Bobby and Her Father by Gillian Daniels in the Dark. And oh my gosh, this story is a wrenching, horrifically funny, devastating take on Frankenstein set in modern-day suburbia and featuring the regular kinds of people that probably maybe live on any given street. Daniels' story twists and turns through unsettling sci-fi to horror and dark comedy into something that is almost, but only almost, heartwarming, at least for a little while. There's a lot of subtle and overt stuff happening in the story as it deals with the travails of parenting, the pain of adolescence, and the awkwardness of being human, or at least human-ish. My next story is Sweet Sting by Sarah Saab in The White Review. And I'll start with a quote from the story. "My job during the war was to administer beatings. This didn't make me better than anyone else, particularly not the people I beat. To ensure that I never forgot this, I was periodically beaten myself. I, Laura Grimsey, a white, beaten quite roughly, but within official boundaries, by a brown. A team of browns was retained expressly for this purpose, to beat the beaters." Saab's story is set in a future that seems both wickedly strange and sadly plausible, and it's a marvelously crafted sci-fi dystopia. And the way violence is used here to enforce and create unity, how it's used to both punish and reward, the way it shapes society to fit everyone into a totalitarian mold, it's all so sharp and so perceptive, and the connections to our own present reality are everywhere. There's a definite hint of Orwell's 1984, and as the story reminded me, it's a good idea to read anything and everything by Sarah Saab. Next up is Slipping the Leash by Dan Mickelthwaite in Podcastle. It's narrated by Austin Malone. This is horror that is so taut and so tense that every sentence shivers with the threat of destruction and violence and pain. It's a freakishly good story, freakishly good both at capturing the internal turmoil of a man who is carrying around more memories and nightmares and pain than he can really bear, and is also freakishly good at capturing the transcendent power of being able to express at least some of that turmoil and share it with others. The wolf, and there is a wolf of some kind here, is just beneath the skin, and the most beautiful moment in the story is when the howl is released. Next up is Mist Songs of Delhi by Sid Jain, or Sid Jain, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, also in Podcastle and narrated by Amal Singh. This story takes place in a world where devotion to the goddesses of ragas has made it possible for people who have lived a full life to return after death as a cloud portrait. This portrait can then unspool itself into the deceased's soul song, filling the air, and I quote, with the lilting music of their lives. Our protagonist, Rajaji, is a priest fully committed to serving the goddesses, and he is also full of admiration and love for the soul songs. But his devotion pits him against his own mother, a scientist, who has very different ideas about this supposed blessing. This is a very deep and contemplative, quietly moving story that explores, in my opinion, how we react to and how we're shaped by both the lives and deaths of the people we love. Uniquely imagined story and wonderfully human. Highly recommend this one. Next up is We Have Evacuated, Have a Good Day by Jendai Brooks Flemister in Anathema, sorry, guys. It's been a long day. This is a story about a terrible storm and a grandfather who lives alone and refuses to evacuate, and one of his grandchildren has to come and help him out. And I love how this story twists and turns through old memories and through the grandfather's old house as the storm worsens. There's a sense of something askew as we realize that the old man might have other things on his mind than just the wind and rising waters. Wonderful story. Next up is another story from Anathema, Tiger of the New Moon by Alison Tai. Hoa, a young woman trapped in a harsh life under her father's thumb, enters the woods and meets Ong Ba Moi, or Mr. 30, the tiger with a taste for man's flesh on every new moon. And what follows once Hoa meets the tiger is a monster tale that is also a love story. The horrors here are not so much of the beast's making as of the humans in the tale. It's sort of a take on Beauty and the Beast, but also something much different, as Tai blends fairy tale and myth with the stark reality of being trapped in a situation you can't get out of, unless, perhaps, you have a tiger on your side. My next story is Awake for the Living by Jordan Corella in Suescape. This is a strikingly stark and beautiful story from Suescape. It's a post-apocalypse story told from the viewpoint of a vulture who is enjoying the spoils of the end of human civilization, corpses. It's also a love story and a story about jealousy and belonging, as the vulture feels a new and dangerous connection to a crow. I quote, "The crow was beautiful when she ate, all black sheen and viscera, her beak slick with spoils as it tilted back, neck bulging with her quarry. The quarry meant for us, we vultures." Gorgeously wrought story with a powerful ending. My next story is The Beginning by Radha Suchi Opubor in Omanana magazine. This is a haunting, heartbreaking tale of climate change, told almost as a horror story, or maybe, rather, a ghost story. And I quote, "I was born before the beginning. I remember. I remember my father's house, low to the ground and solid with a thick iron door. I never felt safer than when I peered out into the stormy night from behind my window bars." It's about a girl remembering the past, her family home, her father, her mother, the weather changing, the waters rising, people leaving the city of Lagos to find safer places to live, and then devastation. My final story for this roundup is Dead Girls Have No Names by Claire Renwood in Nightmare. And I quote from the story. "Mother keeps us in a chest freezer. For preservation, she says, and perhaps this is true." End quote. And yes, indeed, Mother does indeed keep bits of dead girls in her freezer in the story, and after sewing those pieces together into someone new, she has brought them back to life. That life is confused and splintered, with memories submerged and emerging, and there is much violence and vengeance, too, as the dead girls help Mother find men who have done or might do terrible things. What Mother really wants is for the girls to find the man who killed her daughter, but in the end, after the dead girls try very hard to do what Mother wants, they find another purpose. Chilling, deeply unsettling, and also moving. Fantastic horror story. And those were my picks for this month's short fiction roundup. I hope you enjoyed it. The roundup is also available in text format at curiousfictions.com. And thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next month.